Santa Claus. And after watching this, seriously, probably half a dozen times, I decided to look at some of the behind the scenes. You know, when you have the DVD, there's kind of deleted scenes or what's going on. And one of the vignettes they had was on the costume that Martin Short wore. Martin Short was supposed to wear kind of a pajamas type of outfit. It was sort of this flowy, whimsical. He even had like the rock style hair with the long bangs, and about, you know, as they were shooting the film, the director said, this just isn't working. This character feels hollow. He feels whimsical. It just doesn't work. And so they kind of went back to the drawing board literally, and they designed a new costume. And the costume that you see him in now, he's wearing a suit, and his hair is frozen icicles. It's spiked. And one of the things that the vignette did was they showed the exact same scene, and the only difference was the clothing. That was the only difference. It was a scene where Jack Frost is walking down the stairs, and yet they were completely different. On the one hand, you saw a hollow, whimsical. On the other hand, it was a menacing villain that had a purpose, that had a plan, that knew exactly what he wanted to do, and that was to wreak havoc. It was remarkable how simply changing clothes changed the entire character. And of course, he did wreak havoc. He pushed buttons, turned up the oven. This holiday season, with a 7, 4, and 2-year-old, you can imagine Sarah and I would clean up the house, and then seconds later, we look at each other and say, why do we clean? Really? Probably why it's their favorite movie, because they love wreaking havoc. The question for today is this: what difference will Jesus being born in our world make? How will that baby in the manger rule our world? Paul says, as we turn the page, as we turn to a new year, a new calendar, and we are in kind of this transitional time, he suggests that we put on a new set of clothes. Compassion, gentleness, kindness, humility, patience. And to bind all of those with love. Now, did you open up that gift at Christmas time? You know the gift I'm talking about, where you put on your best smile and you look at it and you're like, I'm not quite sure about this. Let's go ahead and leave the tags on that. I hope there's a gift receipt. Anybody, you can be honest. Anybody get a gift like that? Anyone? Oh, you guys are not being honest. We're in church. Okay. Yeah, maybe you did that. That's what we do, right? We all do that. When we go to the store and we buy clothes or we get a gift that we're not sure about, we leave the tags on, right? Because we're not sure if we want to take it back or not. What Paul is suggesting is that we cut these tags completely off and have these clothings as permanent clothing. It's something that we wear always. When you woke up this morning and got ready for church, you no doubt went into your closet. Perhaps it's a walk-in closet, and you looked at all your clothes and decided what you were going to put on. Perhaps you had that feeling of, I have so many clothes and yet nothing to wear. I need a whole new wardrobe. What clothes will you wear in 2016? Will they be compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience? Will you leave those clothes on permanently, or will you grab them as you see fit? You see, this is one of the big differences between 21st century and first century. Nowadays, we have streets lined with stores. We can go to department stores, we can go to high-end clothing stores, we can buy name brand clothes at places like Plato's Closet, right? And we can decide what clothes we want to wear. Tillman even has an Armani suit. He'll show it to you whenever he wears it, I promise. And then he'll remind you that he paid $13.93 for it at Goodwill. That's our world, isn't it? We can go to a department store or buy all these clothes. The reality in the first century is almost everyone had no more than one change of clothing. Almost everyone, when they decided what clothes they were going to put on, it was a decision that would last a long time. Clothes were extremely expensive. They had to hand make all of them. And so people had one or two sets at the most of clothing. So when Paul says, put on these clothing, he's not saying, well, choose the red one or the yellow one, or the tacky sweater or the red blazer. Instead, he's saying, put on these permanently. That this is the way God's people should act, with compassion, with kindness, with humility, gentleness, and patience, binding them all together with love. What clothes will you wear in 2016? Think about the clothing that we wear. At each of our transitional times, clothing matters. When we were baptized, we probably wore white, signifying the purity of God's grace. When we graduate, we wear a cap and gown. Perhaps at your job, there's a uniform that you have to wear, or expected clothing that you would wear. Whenever a woman gets married, one of the most important decisions is what dress she'll wear. And then later on in life, one of the first decisions families have to make when someone passes away is what clothes will they wear in the casket. Clothing matters. When we clothe ourselves in compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, we are showing to the world before we even speak that the baby in the manger matters. Before we even say a word, we can show the world what it means to be a follower of Jesus. What clothes will you put on in 2016? And will all of it be bound up and united in love? Because you see, each of these have a similar characteristic. They are relational emotions. They are relational, even virtues. You can't be compassionate without someone else. Kind, gentle, humble compared to others, patience. Compassionate is one of those words. It has an empathy feel to it, but it's an empathy that leads us to want to do something more. To have compassion for someone is moving beyond empathy towards altruism, towards selfless acts. Because that's the other thing that all of these have in common, is that they're selfless. The world is becoming more and more selfish, we know. There's so much evil in the world, it can make us all feel disgusted at mankind's role. The constant bombardment of negative media, it takes its toll, doesn't it? And at the very least, it's discouraging. But there are still amazing examples of humanity in this world now. There are still amazing examples of compassion, of kindness, of gentleness. There's still amazing examples of people putting others first. Perhaps it's a child's prayer at dinner time. Or it's taking time during the holidays to take gifts to others. Or it's sitting with a loved one that's in an assisted living. Whatever the compassionate, kindness, humility, gentle, patience may be. There are still amazing acts that can lift us up in this world. What clothes will you put on in 2016? And will you have the courage to cut the tags off and keep them on permanently? Not choosing one or the other, but uniting all of them. Enduring with one another constantly. Forgiving one another. This week I read up on humility. And some of the most successful people are among the most humble. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders and people who make the greatest impact are constantly pushing the accolades to others, are comfortable with the phrase, "I don't know." Some of the most successful people are comfortable that maybe they don't have all the answers. They're humble enough to be open-minded to others' viewpoints. In 2016, will we put on humility? The other one that stood out for me is patience. I don't know if that's because I have a house full of kids or what. But we live in a world where everything is at our fingertips instantly, isn't it? Caleb and I play a game where he'll just throw out a question. How many cars are there in the world? Are there more boys or girls? And we can type it into Google. We can ask Google, and you don't have to type anymore, right? You can just ask Siri or Google, and there's the answer right there. And yet we find our patience wearing thin. Will we be patient with one another in 2016? enduring with each other. Paul writes to the Colossians to clothe yourselves with compassion, with kindness, with humility, with gentleness, and with patience. Clothe yourselves in such a way with these things that people know instantly who you are and whose you are. And most importantly, clothe yourself with love, a selfless, sacrificial love that's most perfectly found in the man in the manger, the baby in the manger, who would later become the man on the cross. What clothes will you wear in 2016?